Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, to kick things off, I want you to picture the opening months of 2026. For almost 3 decades, the tech industry basically bought into this deeply entrenched, almost romantic myth. The idea was that physical hardware was just a low-margin utility, right? Just the plumbing. And all the real power, all the real value lived in the code. But suddenly, out of nowhere, that whole mythology suffered a violent, material collapse.
So what exactly happens when the limitless digital cloud crashes headfirst into an impassable physical wall? Well, as the generative AI supernova accelerated way beyond simple chatbots and evolved into these autonomous, multimodal, exascale reasoning systems, the entire planetary tech economy slammed right into that wall. It hit an absolute bottleneck of advanced silicon.
Which brings us to Section 1, the software myth shattered.
This was the exact moment economic gravity violently returned from those trendy software hacker dens straight back to the industrial concrete cleanrooms. We shifted away from the old dogma of the invisible ether, where hardware was just an afterthought, to Jensen Huang's completely unyielding reality, the silicon sovereign. He basically proved that the future absolutely demanded multi-billion-dollar hardware architectures. Because without the iron, the code is completely inert. It literally does nothing.
And let me tell you, the global markets recognized this inversion immediately. By late May 2026, NVIDIA's market capitalization surged past an unprecedented $5.2 trillion, trillion with a T. They became the most valuable listed entity in all of human history. They weren't just defending a components monopoly anymore. They had literally industrialized machine cognition.
All right, let's move into Section 2, Anatomy of the Silicon Sovereign.
You really have to look at the extreme physical engineering of the GB200 compute fabric to get it. NVIDIA essentially couples 72 massive Blackwell GPUs and 36 Grace CPUs into a single liquid-cooled mesh. We're talking 1.4 trillion transistors here. But the real magic? That's the NVLink switch. Instead of all these chips talking over some slow legacy motherboard, they communicate at a staggering 130 terabytes per second. To put that into perspective, that is like downloading the entire internet in a fraction of a heartbeat. No joke. This means the entire multi-million-dollar chassis mathematically behaves as one single exascale parallel processor. And the result? It drops inference token costs by a massive factor of 10.
But here's the catch. You can't just run an exascale engine on standard wall power. The mature Blackwell platform demands 130 kilowatts per rack. And those emerging Vera Rubin chips? Try a volcanic 600 kilowatts per rack. To give you an idea of what that actually means, it's like running hundreds of central air conditioners on full blast, all shoved into a space the size of your kitchen refrigerator. These incredible power densities literally outpace the physical infrastructure capacity of traditional data centers. Actually, scratch that. NVIDIA isn't even really shipping a microchip anymore. They are deploying a full-stack automated cognitive factory.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the physics of scarcity.
So why is there such an intense hardware crunch? Well, it's not some cyclical marketing ploy. It is strictly constrained by the absolute boundaries of physics. While NVIDIA designs the chips, the actual physical printing is done by TSMC, and the absolute primary bottleneck here is CoWoS. This is an ultra-precise, highly delicate packaging technique where the logic die is physically mounted side by side onto a silicon interposer right next to the memory. It's incredibly difficult to do, and it is entirely inescapable.
And check out how this manufacturing bottleneck translates into absolute market control. Even with TSMC projecting these massive industrial expansions to 130,000 advanced wafers a month by the close of 2026, NVIDIA alone just gobbles up over 60% of that total capacity. They are systematically starving the rest of the technology market.
And the squeeze gets even tighter when you add memory into the equation. These systems require massive stacks of HBM3E memory. Now, the manufacturing tolerances here are so incredibly strict that producing it actually cannibalizes conventional DRAM across global cleanrooms. Because of this, the mechanical lead times for Blackwell-class hardware stretched way past 12 months, deep into 2027. Computing power literally became a physical commodity, exactly like oil or enriched uranium, and it was rationed exclusively by Santa Clara. The big takeaway here for you, if you didn't already have a multi-year procurement pipeline locked in, you were effectively locked out of the entire AI revolution.
Let's dive into Section 4, the trillion-dollar turbine. So you might be wondering, how exactly did Jensen Huang leverage this absolute scarcity?
Well, by fiscal 2026, NVIDIA's corporate revenues didn't just grow, they absolutely exploded at a parabolic, near-vertical rate, hitting $215.9 billion. That is a 65% year-over-year jump, and it was fueled entirely by data center GPU sales. Their net income more than tripled in a single quarter. Insane, right?
But here is the wild part. Wang didn't just park this unprecedented mountain of cash in corporate treasury bonds. Oh no. Over just a 16-month block, he deployed $90 billion as a high-velocity strategic weapon for deal-making and ecosystem investments.
So it's absolutely crucial to understand how this cash recycling turbine actually works. When hyperscalers, think Google and Amazon, tried to pivot to building their own custom silicon, NVIDIA took that $90 billion and directly funded upstart competitors. These are the neoclouds like CoreWeave and Lambda Labs. NVIDIA poured billions into them while simultaneously locking them into multi-billion-dollar GPU rental treaties. This totally forced the hyperscalers to keep buying NVIDIA chips just to defend their own market share. On top of that, NVIDIA struck a $2 billion pact with Marvell, who happens to be the very chip designer behind Amazon's custom accelerators. This ensured future custom designs would be natively compatible with NVIDIA's NVLink. It's a brilliant move. Every single dollar of venture cash was systematically trapped and recycled right back through Santa Clara.
And that brings us to Section 5, the bedrock of civilization. To truly understand the gravity of this monopoly, we really have to look at the bedrock historical trajectory. This timeline traces an unbroken mathematical evolution. We start with the planar manufacturing pioneers at Fairchild, way back in 1957, moved to Intel's desktop serial CPU revolution in the late 20th century, and then we hit NVIDIA's trillion-dollar pivot in the 2010s. That pivot dismantled the Intel paradigm by moving us from single-core linear processing to massive parallel GPU networks. And all of that culminates in the exascale cognitive systems of those 2026 Rubin factories.
But wait a second, you might be thinking, if it's all about the hardware, why can't a super well-funded rival just print a faster chip? Well, the answer is the CUDA software layer. For over a decade, AI research scientists have compiled literally every major deep learning library natively on top of this proprietary API. If you want to switch to a competitor's hardware, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar rewrite of the entire enterprise software stack. So the iron funds the software, and the software defends the iron. It's an incredible moat. When you zoom out and look at the big picture here, you see a complete inversion of the tech world order. We've moved from the primary value asset being this easily replicated app code right over to heavily constrained physical GPU fabric. The supply chain has totally shifted from frictionless global replication to hard extraction limits based entirely on TSMC capacities. Capital doesn't just flow into isolated venture rounds anymore. It is caught up in a trillion-dollar recycling loop. And geographically, the center of power has shifted away from the urban hacker hubs and straight back to the suburban concrete clean rooms.
This whole dynamic leaves us with a truly fascinating high-velocity loop between two very different geographies. You have the brilliant software engineers up in San Francisco designing the abstract neural network weights. But the very second those autonomous pipelines actually require execution, they are blasted straight down the peninsula to be trained on the unimaginably massive supercomputing grids in Santa Clara. The suburbs manufacture the physical body of intelligence, while the city designs its soul.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The software developers designed the mind, but the hardware engineers built the furnace. It completely reframes how we view technological progress. The abstractions of digital science are, at the end of the day, ultimately powerless without the raw physical silicon iron to actually process them. As compute capacity continues to be rationed, exactly like enriched uranium, we have to ask ourselves, in a world where intelligence requires massive, physical foundries, who really controls the future of human commerce?